Hey, what's up guys? This video is for section 1.6, which is called relations, and this is the second part. So if you haven't watched the first part, you can go ahead and go back. And just a little review for the first video. We talked about how to graph different points on a coordinate plane. So today we are going to talk about relations because those different points can be a relation. So what is a relation? Well, a relation is just a set or a list of ordered pairs. You guys can see an example here on the screen. We have ordered pairs on this side, 1, 2, negative 2, 4, 0, 3. Remember that in an ordered pair, you do have two different values, one for the x, one for the y, so the x coordinate and the y coordinate. So that's a relation, just a list of ordered pairs, and those order pairs you guys can be represented actually in different ways. So first, let's go ahead at the different methods that you can actually have order pairs represented. So one is just a regular order pairs. So you guys have the parentheses with the x coordinate and the y coordinate. You can also have a table, and I'm going to explain that in a second. You can graph the order pairs, and that's what we did in the previous video. We actually graphed those points. And you can also do mapping with order pairs. So let's go ahead and look what is a table. When you guys have order pairs, in a table, you guys can have the x coordinates or the x values in one column. So the x is one column and the y coordinates or the y values is the other column. So there's two columns and one of them is the x, the other one is the y. This is just to organize the values of the x and the y. Now you have to also understand that this x value corresponds to this y value. This x value corresponds to this y value, and this one corresponds to this one. So when x equals 1, the y equals 2. When x equals negative 2, the y equals 4. When x equals 0, the y equals negative 3. Now those order pairs, you guys have 1, 2, 3 order pairs. You guys can graph it. A graph is just a coordinate plane with the x-axis, the y-axis. And you guys plot or graph the points in that coordinate plane. Now, mapping. Mapping is something that we use to show what is the domain and the range and to make a connection between the two. So mapping connects the domain with its range. Now, what is the domain and range? So let's go ahead and look down here. Domain are the x values of the order pairs. So when you guys have those order pairs, even on the tables, when you guys look at the tables, the x values right here or the x coordinates right here are called domain. Another word that we use is input, which means that when you have an input of 1, there's going to be an output, and that output is the y value, and the y value is called the range, the y values of the order pairs. So when x, the input is 1, the output is 2. So when x equals 1, the y equals 2. We can also use the words domain. When the domain is 1, the range is 2. So that's what the domain and the range is. Domain is the x values, range are the y values. Now, when you guys have a mapping, you are going to have a kind of like a bubble here. And you are going to write down the x values in one bubble, which are the domain, and the y values in your range. Now I'm going to put that on the top so you guys remember x is domain, y is your range. Now when you guys have numbers repeating in an order pair, for example, let's say that we have a 2, a 4, a negative 3, and the next number is 2 again. You guys don't have to write down 2 times in your bubble mapping. You just write it down once. So any number that's repeating, even with the x values, if an x value is repeating, you don't have to write it down twice in the bubble. You just write it down once. So that's how you guys can represent a relation. Now keep in mind, a relation is just a set or a list of order pairs, but you can actually have your regular parentheses order pairs. We can have tables. We can graph those order pairs, and we can do mapping. So we're going to practice. I'm going to give you guys a relation, just a list of order pairs, and we are going to represent those in different ways so we can actually know what they look like. So this example here, we have a set or a list of ordered pairs. You guys see the ones inside of the brackets. And usually that's what we use when we have a set. That's what we use, brackets. So we have 1 point at 2, 5. The second point, negative 2, 3. The next one, 5, negative 2. And the next one is negative 1, negative 2. Now you guys also have to remember that those numbers, they represent a variable. So I'm going to put the variables on the top of the numbers. X is the one at the beginning of the point. So 2 in this case is your X value. And the second point is the Y value. So here's your X. Here's your Y. So the first point is X value or X coordinate. And the second point is the Y coordinate. And here's the X, the Y, and here's the X, and there's the Y. So when you guys know what the X and the Y are, you guys can actually start making a table. You can graph, and you can also do a mapping. So if you look at here, I already have a table made, but we don't have the numbers in that table. So what you do, you guys will have one column for the X, one column for the Y. And some teachers, they call this a T table because if you notice, here's a long T with the X and the Y. So the way you guys do it, you're just going to take the numbers from each point, the X and the Y, and you're going to put in the corresponding column. So here the X is 2 and the Y is 5. So I'm just going to put the 2 in the X and the 5 in the Y. And I'm going to put a line here so I can separate the next set or the next order pair. And the next one, the next point is negative 2 and 3. So I'm going to put a negative 2 here and a 3 for the Y. So notice I'm just organizing the T table or the table with the X values in one column and the Y values in the next one. The next point we have a 5 and a negative 2. And the last one we have a negative 1 and a negative 2 again. So here, that's our T table or our table. You guys have the X values of the points in one column and the Y values in the second column. Now, for the graph, you just go ahead and graph the points like you guys did in the first video. You guys go to the X axis first, and then you guys go to the Y axis. So the first point is 2, 5, and the second point is negative 3, negative 2, and 3. You can also look at the order pair over here. Same thing, 2, 5 is 2, 5 here, negative 2, 3, negative 2, 3. So you guys can use either one to graph the points. So let me graph the first point here. I'm going to go 2 to the right because that is the X coordinate. So I go 2 to the right and then I go up 5, which is the Y coordinate. So from here, I'm going to go up 5 units, and let me just count those units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I go all the way up here. So that's my first point. Let's go ahead and graph the next points. And I already have the points on the coordinate plane. So the first one is 2, 5 right here. Second one is negative 2, 3, which is this one. The next point is 5 to the right and negative 2. So 5, that's your X. Negative 2 is down. So right here. And the last one is negative 1 and negative 2. Now when you guys graph by hand, obviously it's not very accurate, but we have an idea what the graph looks like. So we have 4 different points on the graph with the X-axis on the horizontal and the Y-axis is your vertical axis. Now the mapping. Mapping is where you guys have the X values in one bubble and the Y values in another bubble. Now remember that the X are your domain, your Y are your range. They're also called your input, X, and your output is the Y. So what you do, you are going to write down the X values here, and if any numbers are repeating, you just have to write it down once. So I'm going to write down the X values, and I notice that none of the numbers are repeating. Now these two look alike, but they're not the same because this one is a positive 2, this one's a negative 2. So you actually have to write down those two numbers in the bubble. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have the X values in the bubble already. So we have the 2, negative 2, the 5, the negative 1. None of the numbers are repeating. Now for the next bubble, the Y's, notice that the Y's, these two are repeating. So we have a negative 2 twice. So that means that we are going to write it down only one time in the bubble. You guys need the other ones, but you guys are going to write it down here. So let's do that right now. And notice that I do have the -2 only once, and the other values are on the top. So we have the x values, the y values, the domain, and the range. Now the mapping is where you guys are going to connect the x with the y. So we have to know what corresponds to which variable. So you go back to the table. You can also use your coordinate points up here. 2 corresponds to the 5, so that's 2, 5, that's 1 point. Or you can look at the table, 2 corresponds to 5. So you guys will make an arrow from the 2 to the 5. So notice I'm doing from the 2, from the x, I go to the 5 for the y. The next one is the -2 goes to the +3, so I make an arrow. The next one, the 5 goes to the -2. And the last one, the -1 goes to the -2. So notice that I am making mapping or a map where I connect the x values with the y values. Domain are the x and the range are your y. Now let me just write that down so you also remember that your domain are your x values and your range are your y values. And that's very important because we are going to talk about functions later on, and we need to know which one is the domain and which one is your range. So the next step, I want to determine the domain and the range. Now we already have those here. Domain I know are the x's and the range are the y's. But we actually have to write it down as a list. So let me show you guys the list for the domain and the range. And now you guys see the list of domain and range on the bottom of the screen. So we have the domain and the range. Now, very important that you guys understand how we set up the list. Notice that I'm using brackets here for the domain and the range, and that's what we use. We use brackets, not parentheses. And when you guys write down the numbers inside of the brackets, we do it from lowest to greatest, or from least to highest, to greatest. So you guys are going to start with the smallest number. So when you look at the x values here, the smallest number is -2. So that's why I started with the -2. And then I keep going to all the way the biggest number or the highest number, which is 5. So I put it in order from least to greatest, -2, -1, 2, and 5. Now the range, same thing, you guys have brackets, but these are your range values or the y values. Remember, range are your y values. And notice that we do have the -2 repeating. So when I write that down in my sets for the range, in my list, I don't have to write it down twice. Now the -2 is the smallest number. So I start with the lowest and I end up with the greatest. So -2, 3, and 5. You guys see the -2, the 3, and the 5. This right here is just to make the math look nice. It looks elegant when you guys have the numbers in order from lowest to highest. Usually that's how we do the domain and range. So make sure you guys ask your teacher how your teacher wants the list. The order doesn't really matter because you guys have the numbers in the list. But like I said, myself, I like to have the math look elegant. It looks nice when it is in order. So double check with your teacher as well to know how to write down the domain and the range. All right, guys, so here's another example. What I want you guys to do is pause the video, try it on a piece of paper, and I want you guys to express this set of order pairs, 4, -3, the 3, 2, -4, 1, 0, -3, as a table, as a graph, and mapping. And after that, on the bottom, you guys need to determine the domain and the range. So hopefully you guys try it, but you guys can see the table, graph, mapping, domain, and range on the screen. So once again, when you have your table, one column is your x values. They're your x values. The second column are your y values. Keep in mind that you have to put them with the corresponding number. So 4, -3. Once again, the first number is your x coordinate and the second number is your y coordinate. So we have 4, -3 here. 3, 2 is the second point right here. -4, 1, 0, 3. So that's your table. When you graph, you just plot it in the coordinate plane. Your x-axis is your horizontal axis. The y-axis is your vertical axis. So the first one, you go 4 to the right, 3 down because it's negative. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Remember that we are doing this by hand, so it's not going to be really exact, really perfect, but you guys have a really good graph there. We have the second point, 3, 2. We have the next point, -4, 1. And the last point is 0, -3. Now, since this is 0, you guys are not going to go to the left or to the right. You stay at the origin, but you have to go down 3 because that is the y value. Your mapping. The mapping, just make sure that you check if you have any numbers repeating. So for the x values, we don't have any numbers repeating. The 4 and the -4, they might look the same, but they're not. Remember, this is +4, this is -4, so they're not the same number. So we have the numbers here. For the y's, we do have a number repeating, the -3 and the -3. So since it is repeating, I just write it down one time. So -3 there, and then the 2 and the 1. You are going to connect. You're going to make an arrow from the x value to the y value. So just make sure what numbers correspond to which y value. So the x corresponds to the y, 4 corresponds to the -3. So that's why I have an arrow. 3 corresponds to 2, -4 corresponds to 1, and 0 corresponds to -3. So that's my mapping. Now, again, you have to remember what's the domain and the range. So your domain are your x values, you have them here, or you can look at the table, you have them here, or you guys can actually look at your order pairs, x, 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 and there's the x. So you guys have the domain. So my domain is -4, 0, 3, and 4. Now we like to put it in order from least to greatest. And the range, same thing, -3, and this is repeating, so we don't have to write it down twice. But -3, the 1, and the 2. All right, guys, so now you just need to practice how to change those representations. Notice that we have a table, mapping, and a graph into an order pair. So this is kind of going back. You really have to know that every representation is just a point when you guys graph. You guys can see the graph on this side right here. So they're points. But we are going to write down the order pair. So what we do is when we look at the table, and each table has different numbers, so we have to be careful with that. Notice that here we have the x values, the y values, 6, 1, -5, 3, and then -2, -9, 0, and 2. So the way you guys are going to write down your order pairs, you guys are just going to make parentheses because that's how we write down the order pairs, with parentheses. So my first point will be 6, 1. There's my x value and my y value. So I'm going to have my parentheses 6, 1. That's an order pair. The next one will be -5, 3. The next one, -2, -9. So I'm just following what the table says. -2 corresponds to the -9, so that's an order pair. And the last one is 0 and 2. So I have my table converted to order pairs. So we have the x values and the y values, x values and the y values. Now, if you guys have mapping, this one you really have to pay attention because sometimes you have 2 arrows going out from the x value. So notice here, this number has 2 arrows going out. This one has 2 arrows going out. So what that means is you are going to repeat that number again, because you guys will have repeating numbers. Remember that if a number is repeating in mapping, you just write it down once. So what this means is, since you have 2 arrows, you guys have 2 9s in that order pair. So the way you guys write down your order pair, I'm going to go with the first one. So the first number is 9. So I put 9 here, comma, and the first arrow I'm going to use is the 5. So 9 goes to the 5. So I put 9, comma, 5. Now the second one is going to have a 9 again for the x value because it has a second arrow. And the 9 goes to the 3. So my second point will be 9, 3. The next one only has one arrow. The -6 goes to the -5. The next one is a 4 and it goes to 3. Now the next one, guys, you guys have an 8. Now the 8 has 2 arrows. So you're going to have one order pair, 8, -5. And the second one is 8, +7. So let's write that down. We have 8, -5, and then 8, positive 7. So this mapping, we made it in order pair. A equals to the negative 5, A equals to the 7. So we got those two. If you guys do not have two arrows, just one, like the negative 6 and the 4, well, you just are going to have only 1 point with the negative 6 and a 4. Now the next one, you guys actually have points on a actual graph. So notice here that we have to look what is the coordinate of each point. So I'm going to start with the A in alphabetical order, A, B, C, D, and E. So I'm going to go with A. And A, I'm just going to put here parentheses. A is going to be negative 2 and 3. I know that because from the origin to get to point A, I have to go negative 2, so 2 to the left, and then up 1, 2, 3. So negative 2, 3. My next point is B. So it's going to be positive 3, positive 2. The next one is C. Point C is at 1, negative 1. And again, that's because from the origin, you go 1 to the right, so that's positive, and 1 down, that's negative. You always start with the x-axis. You always go to the left or to the right. The next one is point D, which is 3 and negative 1. And the last one is E. Point E is at negative 2 and negative 4. So once again, if you look at point E from the origin, you go 1, 2 to the left, so that's negative 2, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4. So that's my list of ordered pairs. So from a graph, I made a list of the ordered pairs. You guys have the x values and you guys have the y values. Now this graph actually gave us the names of the points A, B, C, D, and E. Sometimes they don't give you guys names. They don't give you letters. That's okay. If they don't give you guys the actual name, letters of the points, don't use them. Just make sure you write down the order pair of each point and you're okay. So this is how you guys can represent tables, mapping a graph, and order pairs in a relation. Now remember, a relation is just a list of order pairs. So order pairs, this is a relation. Order pairs, this is a relation. Order pairs, this is also a relation. Now when you guys have those order pairs, you guys can make a graph, you can make mapping, and you guys can do a table. Alright guys, I'm going to have to do a part 3 of this section, so make sure you guys check that out as well. And if you guys like my videos, you can click that like button. You can also subscribe to my channel. Make sure you guys practice, and I'll see you guys later.